So Sandra, did we speak last year about creativity? I know certainly we spoke 2 years ago.
We did. We spoke again last year. We
Okay.
spoke about the disruptors in business, the
Hmm,
creatives as disruptors.
that's right. And this year we're going to be talking about presence and emergence. And I know that with your work, with your creative work, presence is quite significant to you, isn't it? You work through focusing on people's presence and transforming their presence in some way when you're teaching. So tell me a little bit about that.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, um, it all stems from the realization that everyone is a brilliant creative being, and we treat the world like some people are and some people aren't, and most of us think of ourselves as one of those that isn't, and so what I first try to do with people is to get them to be fully present in the moment of actively offering whatever is running through their mind. And it's a process that I really developed an awareness of through working for a number of years in improvisation and with actors, and getting people to recognize their spontaneous response to something rather than their measured response. And one of the first things that I do when I walk into a room with people is say, everybody raise your hand if you've ever had to stop and think. And everybody raises their hand. And then I say, no, you didn't. You've never had to stop and think. We think faster than we can perceive. What we stop to do is to judge, to sift, to choose which thought we think is acceptable. And that keeps us from ever really being present and ever really allowing the emergent possibilities to take place, because we're deciding which thought that crosses our brain might be worthwhile in someone else's judgment. And so we're not present with ourselves, recognizing that that thought that's coming through us is coming through us for a reason.
And sometimes
You know,
people walk into
we
a
are the
room.
important being at any present. Pardon me?
Yeah, sometimes people walk into a room, and you know this like from your acting background, is that they walk into a room and their presence just fills the space. It's like they've got just, such strong, powerful presence. Is that something that you can teach people to expand their presence? Is that a skill?
Yeah, I think it's a skill. I think it's an awareness. It's simply a releasing, if you will, of that presence, that energy that's already there. I mean, we are all the same level of energy. We are all the same amount of creative being as anyone else. And so that energy difference is about the amount of release and expression that's being allowed to happen at any moment. It's not like one person actually has more energy or more presence than another human being. We are all, happening in that moment at the same level. And so the presence is really about getting people to step into the moment, be totally present, and then their presence can be expressed. To me, one of the strongest things that I can ever teach people is that they are in complete control of their energy, that they are energy. And I was always talking to actors about, okay, I'm going to get woo here now, guys. Everything is energy, and it's about where you focus your energy. And that is the transformative quality, whether it's in a scene or it's something that you are speaking to another person or feeling for another person. Everybody has felt that thing that happens when someone is upset in a room and they can just feel it. They can't even necessarily see them, but they can feel it. And that person might be very inexpressive verbally, but their energy is giving off, that that impression, and we're picking up on it, whether they're expressing it verbally or not. And so part of my work is to get people conscious of what they are thinking, doing, and feeling at any given moment that most of us are unconscious of most of the time.
Yeah, because it has an impact on everyone around them, so as you say, the person who's feeling upset, even though they might not verbalize their being upset, it has an impact on others. And at the same time, there are those who exude this kind of star quality, as it were. And what you're saying is that we can all potentially have this star quality presence.
Yeah, we all do have this star quality presence. We just aren't used to allowing it. It's just like that notion that there are some people that are talented and some people that are not, and some people that are creative and some people that are not, and some people that are smart and some people that are not. The reality is that, I find it fascinating that we actually think as human beings, most people have some sort of spiritual perspective. And if we actually think that whatever we believe created us and put us here, picked some people to be more put here correctly than others, and they goofed up on some, that the creator goofed it and messed up and left some people without that same amount of energy or ability to express. And it's not that some of us are lacking, it's that we are in this myriad spectrum, if you will, this rainbow of potential expression. And some of us just have not really bought into and accepted that we have this ability to express, and that we came here for a reason. We came here for that very transformation. We came here for that expression. We're here to do something, and our job is to do that something, whatever it is, as brilliantly as we can. And if we aren't even acknowledging that there is a something, then we can't get in touch with that energetic impulse, if that makes sense.
What you're saying is profound, because a lot of people, it's like you say, there's that, some people think that person's more creative than I am. And likewise, they'll say that person has star quality, but I couldn't possibly ever have star quality. And what you're saying is profound, because even though we cannot change our physical features, so, some people can be said to be more attractive than others, like some people are taller and some people are shorter, and we can't do anything about that. But what you're saying is that with this thing about our energy and our star quality presence, it is something that each one of us can tap into.
Absolutely. And it's, and I think a lot of times those of us that think we're not as pretty or as articulate as someone else, we end up using our energy to hide, to protect, instead of using our energy to express, and recognizing that it's about, there are all those cliches out there in the world about what you give is what you get, and we really don't recognize that when we give our energy, we get back exactly what we're throwing out there. It's like, I always go back to absolute simple basics of improvisation, because I think that, Shakespeare's line, I've probably said this to you before, that, Shakespeare's line that all the world's a stage, wasn't just a pretty piece of poetry. It was literally a metaphysical roadmap to life, that we can look at the fact that if it works on the stage, it works in life. as a way to direct our energy. And when I teach people to act or to improvise or to write or to do anything now, I start with the basics of improvisation, which are offering, accepting, and blocking. Everything you are doing in your life, from the first breath to the last, is either an offer, accepting an offer, or blocking an offer. And what we tend to do is get really good at blocking. We block ourselves, we block the universe, we block other people, we block ideas, and we forget that in every moment, if we approach that moment as an offer, as an opportunity to offer, and we accept whatever we're being given as an offer, and really accept it, and we look at the fact that the universe never blocks. It only offers, and it accepts.
And when you use that metaphor, all the world's a stage. So using that metaphor, some people would never accept the offer to be the protagonist in a play. They would prefer to be the extras. They're quite comfortable in being in the margins and being an extra, but never the protagonist. And some people would argue, well, yes, that's true, because the audience will recognize who has got that star quality, who deserves to be the protagonist, and who doesn't. And you're saying that everyone potentially could harness that energy, but not everyone does, and therefore they are left on the margins as extras.
Absolutely, but that's because of the assumption that we're actually in a story that is outside of our control. We're each the hero in our own story, and we're also the playwright. So we are writing that story by what we put into it and what we expect and how we respond to each thing that we receive. So it's really about taking that responsibility, if you will, for just saying, I am the center of this story. You are the center of your story, et cetera, with every human being. But somewhere we bought into this notion that it's logical to accept that some of us were just put here to be the background for those relative few gifted humans who look like they are supposed to be, as you say, the protagonist. But right. Every single one of us is the protagonist, is the lead character in our own story. And we need to start living like that.
And I suppose that is the metaphor of the hero's journey. It's like sometimes we need to embark on that journey before we recognize our position and our, the role that we deserve, basically. And as you say, it's about being the protagonist, the hero in our own journey.
Absolutely.
That shifts the way we behave.
Absolutely. So whether you're talking about Joseph Campbell or William Shakespeare or Ernest Holmes or whoever, everyone, all philosophers, Gandhi, Buddha, Jesus, everyone is saying the same thing, that there is only that energy, there is only love, it is embodied within us, and each of us has the responsibility to give that to others to the best of our ability. Whether it's the Course in Miracles, or there's a wonderful quote from Marianne Williamson about who am I to play small, and Martha Graham wrote that beautiful letter to Agnes de Mille about the idea that each of us has a unique personal expression that we are meant to give. And if we don't, it's lost in all time, and it's not up to us to decide whether or not it's worthy. Yes, it's worthy, and the judgment of that is we're here. We clearly have something to do. And as soon as I ask someone, do you really believe that you were created in order to just fill up the backdrop for the geniuses, the scientists, the people that solve the problems? Or do you believe that you were created perfectly for who you are? And it comes back to that personal responsibility, that we like to be a little bit lazy and think that, we can spend time just watching the TV. But if we're all here for a purpose, for our own purpose, I think everyone can agree that for no one was it likely to eat Cheetos and lay on the couch and watch someone else solve the problems on the news. You know, we don't know what we are capable of doing until we step out and accept the responsibility to try. That's all we're being asked to do, is to offer, is to give. You know, the janitor in the building might have the answer for everything that is off at Microsoft. But if nobody's listening to the janitor, nobody's looking at the janitor, and the janitor thinks he's just a janitor, you know, where did that answer go?
Yeah, and I suppose so many of us, we spend so much, like a significant proportion of our time observing other people's stories rather than creating our own.
Absolutely. And we're not even observing other people's stories. We're observing other people's creative expression of a story that transpired in their head. You know, very rarely are we watching like documentaries of somebody's life. We're actually watching a fictional story. And we're giving more attention to that and more emotional charge to that than writing our own story.
So thinking about the work that you do in, you know, in encouraging people to be more present, tell me about emergence. So how does emergence, you know, the emergence of unplanned, unforeseen, unexpected, the surprising things that result, or the consequences that that emerge from that, how do they have an impact in transforming their presence even more?
Well, I think it comes fundamentally down to that notion of realizing that everything that happens, everything that is, even if it seems like it's bad, it's an offer. And when you accept that as an offer, you know, I had a unique, well, not so unique experience. This is kind of how I do every moment, but I had an experience where I fell late at night in a parking lot between two large vehicles and broke my shoulder. And I could have laid there forever and no one would have seen me. And I couldn't get up. But when I hit the ground, the first thing that literally sprung from my mouth was, okay, what's the gift in this? Mm-hmm. And eventually, over time, there were a myriad gifts that came from that. But I have kind of conditioned myself to look for the gift in everything, to look at it as an offer. And not only that, but an offer I am making into my life. If we look at everything as everything happens for us, not to us. There is nothing that happens to us. It happens for us to encourage us to buy into those emergent possibilities. You know, if we go back to the play metaphor, if you don't have conflict in a play, you don't have a play. If you don't have an obstacle for a character, then you don't have an interesting character. Kids today, you know, when I have younger clients that I work with, I leave the play metaphor and I talk about gaming. And when you talk about gaming, I just say to them, do you ever want to pick up the controller and play a character that faces no obstacles and just kind of lollygags around or sits and watches the other characters do something? You know, is that why you play the game? And they're like, no, that would be boring. I'm like, hello, that's what your life is. It is that game that you are playing this character, and your character has obstacles to overcome so that they can become and be transformed into whatever they are intending to become. When you choose that character, you know what the possibility is, you know, for that character to get to in the end of the story, if they can leap over all the obstacles. And whether you're playing D&D or games or whatever, the characters pick up points and they pick up strengths and they pick up, you know, abilities along the way. They gain in their maturity and abilities. And that is just like us in our lives. We are playing these characters here. You know, our soul, our energetic source is playing these characters. And the way that we encounter those emergent possibilities is however we are placing them in front of ourselves.
And I suppose emergence occurs when we come out of our comfort zone, when we stretch, because if we remain within the comfort zone, so someone who's gaming and they're doing exactly the same thing, then there's no stretch. It's just a repetition of the same old, so no transformation takes place. Whereas the character in the game, the character transforms having overcome all of these obstacles.
Absolutely. The obstacles are the gifts. The obstacles are the gifts, and they are the pathway to transformation. They're the pathway to growth. You know, they're the pathway to emergence. We have to learn and strive and build that muscle in order to emerge. You know, it's like the chrysalis, when that caterpillar is in that chrysalis, it doesn't break out of the chrysalis until it is strong enough to break that bond, until those wings are so large that they are going to push their way out into the becoming of the next phase of that creature, you know?
And I've read somewhere that if we help them out, they don't survive because they're too weak. They
Absolutely
have that resistance. And it's the same with flower buds. You know, if we try and give them a helping hand, they probably won't blossom as much as well as they would have if we'd allowed them to emerge as a flower without our tampering with it.
Absolutely, which is part of what I speak to parents about, is that, you know, if we're helicopter parents and we're making it all easy and we're fixing everything for our kids, we wouldn't, when our child is trying to learn to walk, the first time they fall down, we don't pick them up and carry them for the rest of their lives so that they don't have to experience falling down again. If we do, their legs will atrophy and they'll never walk. You know, so it's that same notion that we have to allow that the struggle is actually the beautiful reason we're here.
And then, you know, like everyone else all over the world dealing with the coronavirus, the presence of the virus has caused an emergence of all kinds of both possibilities, you know, both beneficial and negative as well. And it's made an impact on everyone, the way we work, the way we live, the way we communicate with our families. So in your work, how has the presence of the coronavirus pandemic, in what way has that led to an emergence of novelty for you? Novelty and crisis, perhaps.
Say that again, say the last.
Yeah, it's, you know, both novelty and also crisis, you know, so some people view crisis as an opportunity and others see it as being a detrimental thing, and others will see it as like we've just been talking about, the resistance that is required for us to strengthen and to endeavor and create new opportunities.
Well, I think it in itself, it's an opportunity. And like, you know, like I mentioned before, we're always going to have people that offer back to that opportunity, that accept that opportunity, and those that block. And we see all kinds of what seems almost like insane resistance, you know, insane blocking, you know, going on to not just accept. And I constantly go back to the idea that if we're here at any given point in time, in my belief, we're here at the time that we chose to be here, to experience the opportunities, even if they seem icky. You know, we chose to experience those opportunities to see what we would do and how we would transform and transcend in that moment. And that's what we're called to do. We're called to this moment in history to figure out what are the offers into our life. How can we become greater? How can we emerge as more from this profound resistance?
And it doesn't happen in isolation. Like, even going back to that metaphor of William Shakespeare, even if you have a solo artist on the stage, there's an audience. So there's still an interaction, there's a relationship, there's an interdependence. And And so this emergence, it's like how we respond to it. It's not just simply a personal response, it's an interdependent response. And it's an emergence of new networks, perhaps, that didn't exist previously, or new ways of communicating.
Absolutely. And there are, the stage is an absolutely collaborative space. It is a place of cooperation. If it is a place of competition, it doesn't function. And the same is true with nature. And we as human beings have it wrong. We have built up our societal structures in the modern world to be based in competition. And that is part of what is causing us a problem right now. Is competition is a form of blocking. It's a form of lack thinking. It's a form of thinking that if you do better, I necessarily am doing worse. If you have more, I necessarily must be having less. And that is a competitive perspective that does not exist in the natural world, and so when we can reframe our thinking to view this experience as the ultimate opportunity for cooperation and collaboration, then we can allow for the fact that in order for it to get better for any of us, it actually does need to and will get better for all of us. If we are cooperating and collaborating, we will find those answers that will bring the emergent possibilities.
Well, there's two ways of looking at nature. One view is that nature is all about survival of the fittest, that sometimes it's the weeds that end up being the most dominant unless we pull out the weeds and make sure that the plants that we've actually planted have enough space. And so there's that survival of the fittest view of nature. And then there's the other one where, yes, things do seem to collaborate ecologically. There's a balance in the system, but nature doesn't have ethics and it doesn't have morality. Nature doesn't have culture. So all of these things about taking care of those who are vulnerable, nature doesn't do that. Nature looks after those who are strong enough to look after themselves.
But what we are trying to do when you talk about pulling the weeds is we're trying to shape nature to our view of what's good or bad. And as you say, nature doesn't have morality. Nature doesn't have a sense of good or bad. It has a just is. And so that kind of reflects back to what I'm saying. If we accept what is as just is, it's not evil, it's not good, it just is. Now, what are we going to do with it to collaborate with it? There are weeds that certainly are difficult if you're trying to grow food, but there are ways to approach that from I know best and I'm just going to obliterate the weeds and therefore I'm going to make toxic food. Or there are ways to figure out how to collaborate by maybe planting something else in cooperation with that plant that will help them, the plants to sort of self-select, what grows. There are ways to look at everything as an offer for collaboration, for cooperation. And it's necessary for us to look at how we collaborate, because as we spoke about earlier with the metaphor and being the hero in our own story, you can't be the hero in any story if there isn't someone audiencing the story and the supporting characters. And yes, wherever you turn that camera on that story, you're going to have a different central character depending on who you're focused on. But there are always multiple characters or there's no point. And if there is no audience, if you're only doing it for yourself and there is no audience and there is no collaboration, then there is not a successful production. The stage does not function in isolation and in a vacuum. That's and right. neither do our existences.
Yeah, you can't be a leader unless you have followers.
Yeah. And we really, ultimately, we don't do anything alone. We like to think we do, but somebody is making it possible for us to turn on the light switch. And so you and I are sitting alone in the rooms that we are in, but we're not at all doing this on our own. I have no idea how to make this connection between you and I across continents and oceans without a bunch of brilliant, beautiful people who are doing their thing in their story.
Yeah, those who've facilitated this communication, this channel of communication through technology and all the gadgets that we're using to enable this.
And this is a collaboration. This is a cooperation. If it becomes a competition, somebody is going to decide that it's theirs to decide who can and who cannot have it. Do you see what I'm saying? It's just when we get into competition, we start blocking other people's emergence. And that's not our job. Our emergence is not dependent on someone else not emerging. If we all came into the fullest realization of whatever we could think, be, and do, oh my goodness, can you imagine? I mean, how many people sit at home and see something happen on TV and go, I thought of that years ago. Well, but they didn't do anything about it. The person on the TV is the person that did something with the thought as it passed by.
That's right. And that's where the impact, so the person who actually took action, there's an impact, there's a feedback loop. And so they have transformed, whereas the person who did nothing with it, there's very little impact on their being.
Right. Because if yes, because the impact on your being is directly proportional to the positive impact you're having on other beings. You have to offer in order to not just be in a constant state of over accepting someone else's offer. That's not healthy. When you are just buried in the offers of others and you don't offer, an improvisation is really dissatisfying to an audience and to the performers when one person offers and the other person accepts it but doesn't return another offer. Then it just sort of keeps sort of falling on this deaf ear.
There's an imbalance in the feedback loop then, isn't there? And they call it reciprocity, don't they? That there has to be a balance, the yin and yang, given.
Absolutely. And not about judgment of the worthiness of the offer, but really truly accepting it for what it is. I know I've spoken with you before about, I work with kids a lot of the time who are cognitively disabled at a level that they're not supposed to be able to do the things that I ask them to do. And the teachers many times would say to me when I would start a residency, well, you can try, but that's not going to happen, because they've never done this or that or the other thing. And then 6 months later, the teachers are like, whoa, what happened to these kids? And it's just literally that I expect them to be brilliant and I accept whatever they offer until you sort of lubricate that passageway, and get that stalled passage of information and creativity to start, get the flow going. If we're in the flow, that energetic flow, energy is everywhere. We just think that it's encapsulated in these bodies, but it's not. It's everywhere. It just appears differently. And so they can't have less energy because they are less like those of us that set up the systems that are, swallowing them up and denying them their expression. But we are the same amount of energy. We just have to figure out how theirs is being translated into this world. And they write and create and see and envision extraordinary things.
And I suppose it's your presence acts as a catalyst for their presence to emerge.
Yes. And that is such a fabulous phrase that you just said. I mean, if we could all look at ourselves as the catalyst for everyone we meet having an opportunity to further emerge, you know, and that everyone we meet is an opportunity for us to further emerge. If we look at that offering as a consistent and constant need, and when someone's not offering, we make it safe for them to offer. We let them know we're going to receive it, you know. We're not very good at receiving either as human beings. And so that exchange, that reciprocity that you spoke about doesn't happen. And it largely springs out of this judgment paradigm that we are in, that we think something is better than something else, something is right and something is wrong, something is good and something is bad, as opposed to it is. Now, what am I going to do with it? You know, what am I going to do about it? I mean, how many people have sat around and argued and discussed what's wrong with our systems, what's wrong with our political systems or our leaders or the medical community or just healthcare in general or whatever, and you know, street signs, or whether but do they get out of their house and do something about it? Do they even vote, or do they write something, or do they say something to someone that has the ability to actually take a transformative action on that thing that they view as wrong? We aren't actively participating on the stage. It's like we're standing backstage just kind of reciting our lines to ourselves. Yeah. You know, we aren't leaping out there and taking center stage in our own life. And it feels overwhelming, I think, to people, because they think they've got to prove that they have a right to be there, rather than just believing and accepting and having faith in the fact that if they're there for a reason. And that it's about the discovering of that reason and then the stepping into it.
That's so true. That's so true. And I was just thinking about visibility at the same time. It's like some people prefer to make themselves invisible and play the extra, you know. And presence is about visibility as well, isn't it? There's a conscious kind of desire to be present. And I suppose those who aspire to be on the stage as a protagonist, they embrace being visible, and those who would rather be at the back of the room, you know, whether it's in the lecture hall or whether it's in the theatre, the audience right at the back, small, playing invisible. So that's
and that comes from that notion that things are happening to us. You know, that the circumstance we're born into happened to us. The job that we have happened to us. What our boss says happened to us. They did it to us. And if we can learn to look at everything as happening for us, then it's kind of not pretty for some people that prefer sitting on the couch eating Cheetos, watching television, you know, because it demands, that perspective on the universe demands a sense of personal responsibility, that we are we are able to be, do, and have whatever we're willing to step out for. And that excuse of this happened to me, you know, my children, I have 4 daughters, and they all will, you know, every once in a while get in that whiny mode and say something, you know, something happened to them, or life really kicked them today. And I'll be like, oh, no. What do we say? Life didn't do anything to us. Oh, no, everything happens for us, not to us. You know, it can be tiring if you want to be lazy and say, you know, I'm just going to kind of float through life and take it as it comes. That's accepting things is not the same as passively allowing them to dictate your life. You are hopefully a conscious creator in your life. You're a creator whether you're conscious of it or not. So the role to assume is as a conscious creator to really be consciously present. This brings us back to that original question. You know, we have to consciously be present of what we are doing, which is an offer. What are we doing? What are we thinking? What are we being in every moment? Because that is the script that we are writing. You know, it's like if somebody's eating Cheetos on the couch, if they put down the Cheetos and pick up a cucumber and they turn off the TV and go outside, then they're present to see that person that maybe has a flat tire, and they help that person that would have struggled for hours outside the front door of their house had they not turned off the television. You know, it might have been more comfortable to be on the couch, but when you actually get yourself to just step outside and see what's out there, it might look like a terrible thing. Maybe there was a car accident, but maybe you were there to pull the person out of the car or change the tire or call on your cell phone or when theirs was out or whatever, you know. But if you're not present, you don't know what you don't know.
In helping somebody, you've added value, whereas, you know, maybe sitting on the couch eating Cheetos, you're not really adding any value to anybody. And as you were saying, it's like presence. If each one of us has the ability to tap into this energy that is available to all of us, that's quite an equalizer, isn't it? You know, we might not have access to resources in terms of, you know, some people have more money, some people have less money, some people have a bigger house, some people have a smaller house. But in terms of energy, it's a little bit like air, that it's, you know, okay, some air is polluted and some air is not polluted, but energy, it's even more equal than that, because we all have access to, you know, it seems as though what you're saying is that we all have access to this star quality presence. Therefore, we can all tap into that energy equally.
We can. It literally just requires faith. You know, I mean, faith is a quality that we are almost taught from birth to put our faith in stuff outside of us. Our faith in God, which, you know, is either perceived as being outside of us or not, depending on the philosophical perspective that you come from. But you know, a lot of times in the Christian faith, at very young, we're taught, you know, God is up on a cloud somewhere with a white beard and these flowing robes and making, you know, decisions. And we're honoring, whether it's Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, we're honoring something outside of ourselves, rather than looking at this notion that creative act has already occurred that put us here. And so now our presence is a given. It's done. It's here. So what are we taking the responsibility to make from that presence? And recognizing that there used to be a little bumper sticker around when I was a kid that would say, and it had this little cartoon of a child on it, and it would say, I know I'm perfect because God don't make no junk. And so it's like, it's that, that idea that yes, each of us is special and unique, and we're unique because we're a little piece to that gigantic puzzle. But we have to put ourselves into the puzzle. We can't just stand back and look at it. You know, I think we've got a beautiful example right now of what happens when people, even if they vote, right? They vote for somebody that they expect to fix their problem for them. And if they perceive that their biggest problem is somebody else has got their job, or somebody else has got more money than them, or whatever. And we have seen recently that if someone comes along and says, I can fix that. I'm richer, smarter, better than these other people, and I can make your life more like mine, that people will vote for that. And they think that that's all of the responsibility they had in that. is just to allow that person to do what they said they were going to do, whether or not they actually have the ability to do it, you know? And really, when we see even governments or businesses, institutions, education systems as huge collaborations rather than structures that have a pinnacle with somebody or somebody's up here, and that the people up here are more important than the people down here. That when we can flip that paradigm to looking at it all as one giant collaborative circle, that has the sacred purpose of everybody in the center of that collaborative circle. You know, I say that I work with creatives and leaders and teachers and dreamers to maximize their impact through inspired action. Well, we get that inspiration through that feeling of passion, like you said, you know, inside what that thing is that's pulling us to do something. And everybody has it. Some people are just better at drowning it out and staying on the couch. Everybody has it. And if we can shift the amount of passion to come above the amount of fear that we're experiencing about what it would mean to pursue that passion, that's when we can actually have that impact. But most of us are really given to fear and faith. When I said, you know, we needed faith, it's because if we look at that term, you know, the term act of faith, we don't have acts of hope. We don't have acts of belief. That's not in our vocabulary. You know, that's not a phrase. It is an act of faith, which means that faith seems to me to be belief plus action. You have to do something, you know? And we get so caught up in the judgment of whether or not the doing was good enough or will be good enough that it keeps us on the couch. You know, there's that lovely story of Peter walking on water, right? And Jesus saying, walking on the water and getting Peter to get out of the boat. And Peter got out of the boat and he stood on the water for a couple of seconds, and then he got afraid and he fell into the water. And Jesus said, "O ye of little faith." And I used to talk about this all the time and say to people, well, yeah, but nobody says anything about the guys that stayed in the boat. You know, they didn't even get out. But Peter had a few seconds of standing on the water. And Jesus didn't say, "Oh, ye of no faith." He said, "Little faith." That little faith got that guy an opportunity to experience walking on water for a couple seconds. And we are so busy criticizing Peter for losing the faith after he took the initial act and not making another offer and another offer and another offer. We're so busy criticizing him for the offers that he didn't make subsequent to that gigantic offer that we forget about the people who made no offer whatsoever. And so they stayed safe.
That's just it, isn't it? That it's about wanting to stay safe, and safety is, you know, there's a time and place for safety, that because that allows us the incubation. You know, we need of incubation, but there has to be a time when we emerge from that incubation period, and just like a flower doesn't stay in the bud forever, it needs to blossom.
Absolutely. Considering our choices is a very reasonable thing to do. But it's about considering our choices. That's the act that a lot of people don't even engage in. You know, the thought goes by and they swat it away like a fly instead of considering it, allowing it. We have to first allow those thoughts to be valid to ourselves before we can ever learn to start offering them. They have to be okay. Because we dreamed it, we imagined it, we thought of it. You know, a lot of us will not go for a dream that we know every fiber of our being really wants because we're afraid of what someone else will think. And they are probably doing the same thing. And so we're all just hanging out in little groups, you know, talking about what other people are doing.
Yeah. So Sandra, to sum up then, so let's just summarize what we mean by presence, emergence, and impact in your work. So just
Oh,
to
wow. To summarize all that. Well, I think we each have an equal amount of presence to bring into every circumstance that we are in this world. And those circumstances are of our own creation, and they are our responsibility to transform into whatever we choose by dealing with the obstacles as a gift rather than something that is meant to stop us or something that is too big. Everything that happens in our life happens to us, happens for us, not to us, so that we can step into the emergent possibilities of our lives.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Sandra. It's been so inspiring speaking with you, and you know, I hope that you continue to be a catalyst for others to emerge with a stronger presence.
And I hope that same thing too. That's what I'd love to do. Thank you so much, Jesvir, for having us here today.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.